Nearly 2 million women in the UK experience pain during sex. Many of these women have a condition called vaginismus. It's where the muscles in the vagina contract involuntarily, making penetration difficult or impossible.
And it felt like when you graze your knee, it felt like touching that skinless bit of your body.
I've heard really terrible stories of doctors just saying, oh, just have a glass of wine and you'll be fine.
I sort of just had this image of just sort of, tearing and damage and pain, and how could it possibly work?
Not much is known about the prevalence of vaginismus, but researchers are beginning to prove that it's more common than we might think.
When I spoke to psychosexual therapists, they said they could actually earn their living just treating women with vaginismus. That's how many women in Ireland are affected by it. Now, there's no statistics available, but they said it's so common.
I'm Maya Bowles, and I was diagnosed with vaginismus when I was 16. After going through treatment 6 years ago, I want to understand more about the causes of vaginismus and investigate what more could be done to help the millions of women who live with the condition. Vaginismus is the body's automatic reaction to the fear of any form of penetration. Whenever penetration's attempted, the vaginal muscles tighten up on their own. Basically, that means that tampons or even something as small as a cotton bud can be really painful to put in, and you have absolutely no control over it.
For me, vaginismus came from repeatedly being told by friends and in the media that sex is painful and developing an anxiety around that. And I want to know if that's the case for everyone who has vaginismus.
How are you?
I went to meet Isley Lynn, a playwright who has primary vaginismus, which means she's had it her whole life, so she can't have penetrative vaginal sex. She wrote a play about her experiences, including the first time she tried to have sex.
Everything was perfect and I was relaxed and excited and turned on and open and wet and all those things. And when the penis was introduced, none of that changed, but I was confused and he was confused because it was like there was a brick wall, and it felt like when you graze your knee, it felt like touching that skinless bit of your body. It made me feel like any boyfriend would leave me at the drop of the hat if I did anything wrong or bad, or if I was too mean to them, or because they can't fuck me, they can't have sex, they can't put their penis in my vagina, and therefore I'm on thin ice all the time.
Isley told me she didn't really know what caused her vaginismus, and she didn't really want to know either. So I decided to speak to someone who had vaginismus and has also made a career out of helping women work through the issues that caused it.
I tend to ask at the beginning of the session, what is the main thing right now, mental or physical, that is your biggest obstacle in overcoming vaginismus? And sometimes she will say something like a fear. There was quite a lot of negative stories I had heard about first-time sex, which caused a lot of fear within me. I was really, really scared that I was going to bleed, and I was scared that it was going to hurt. And so when I did try and have sex for the first time with my husband, exactly what I thought would happen is what happened, because I was anticipating it. I didn't bleed because I was so afraid that as he tried to kind of put his penis into my vagina, it automatically started hurting. Like the moment there was contact, it started hurting. And as he tried to go in, it just hurt more and more, and it just felt like it couldn't go in. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know that what I was going through at the time was even called vaginismus. I just thought, oh, everyone warned me about this. This is just something, this is kind of like a rites of passage.
But from looking into the causes of vaginismus a bit more, I found out that fear isn't the only thing that can trigger it. Things like shame and self-esteem are also huge factors.
What this is for, we have some bills here and some handles. The bills go inside the vagina.
Sarah teaches medical students to do vaginal examinations, but she also had vaginismus herself. She says that feeling a sense of shame around being sexual was the main reason she developed it.
I think I didn't want people to associate me with sex because I thought that would be horribly embarrassing. Because I was, a little bit overweight with bad skin. I've still got acne, I just cover it up. I had bad skin, and I had a little stomach, and I pulled my trousers up over it to hide it, and my clothes didn't fit, and I brushed out my hair so it frizzed, and I was very, very kind of a bit of a lump. And who would want to think about me and sex in the same sentence? What an awful thing to take place. So I would disassociate as much as I possibly could from it. And that, if you disassociate very hard, how are you then supposed to embrace it in a different context? That's quite a big cognitive leap to make. I think there was anxiety as well. I sort of just had this image of just sort of, tearing and damage and pain, and how could it possibly work?
Although current research on vaginismus is limited, Maria McAvoy from Dublin City University has just published a study revealing the psychological and even cultural causes of vaginismus.
Anxiety is a really big part of it. It can be anxiety specifically about penetration, which is like a phobia. But a lot of women have general anxiety as well, would suffer very much from high anxiety. So when I spoke to a lot of therapists and the physiotherapists that I interviewed, for example, I remember one therapist saying, if you walked past the waiting room when you're waiting to see a woman with vaginismus, typically they will be hunched over in the chair. Their whole body is tensing. She said you can actually see it. It's their whole body. If you want to look at the broader perspective as well, when you look at rates of vaginismus all over the world, the rates tend to be highest in very religious orthodox countries. And it doesn't matter what religion you're talking about. So very orthodox Christian countries like mine, Ireland, we had a very strong Catholic influence that was unique in Europe. A completely unique situation in terms of how much the Catholic Church controlled our society for a very long time. Very high rates of vaginismus in Ireland. The highest rates ever recorded in Europe, actually, were in psychosexual clinics in Dublin in the 70s and 80s.
Maria told me why she thought vaginismus was so common in religious communities, based on the experiences of women she spoke to for her study.
A lot of them talked about from a very young age in their families, there would have been very specific shaming and frightening messages around sex. So things like, if you have sex, it's dirty, it's dangerous, very judgmental words like slut or, those kind of words would have been associated with having sex. The family would have very much said, this is not something that you do, it's not something that nice girls do. If you get pregnant, you'll shame the family.
But as a Muslim woman, Amira says the religious context is a bit more complicated.
We follow the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, and he actually would talk about sex to women and men at the time and educate them about their bodies in a very open way. So sex wasn't taboo at the time from kind of like the original source of Islam in terms of what the Prophet used to do. So when I realized that, it made me more passionate about becoming a sex educator, not just within the Muslim community, but more broadly in the world, is realizing that the reason it's taboo isn't actually religious, it's cultural or societal, or just comes from people's own awkwardness of talking about it.
So it seems from the women that I've spoken to that the causes of vaginismus are often psychological, but the treatments that I was offered were mainly physical ones. One of the main things that women with vaginismus are offered as treatment is something called dilators, which help women get used to vaginal penetration. Dilators come in different sizes. A patient starts by trying to insert the smallest size, and over time they move up to the larger ones.
The goal isn't to get the dilator in. The goal isn't to dilate anything or stretch anything. It's about that building awareness and building that control of the pelvic floor, so they've got the ability to relax and lengthen, so that if the goal is penetrative sex, that feels more realistic and feels achievable. And I'd like you to rest both hands on your tummy, and as you do that, just make sure the fingertips are touching.
Alongside the dilators, physiotherapists also teach things like special breathing techniques to help women control and relax their muscles. But are these physical treatments alone enough?
Vaginismus is complicated, and that's why we're a multidisciplinary service. So it's not just us physios on our own. We work, as I said, with clinical psychologists, with counsellors, with gynecologists, because it might be that you have a young woman with vaginismus that has really horrible, painful periods, and actually that's going to be a contributing factor to their symptoms. So it's really important that we work as a multidisciplinary team. But we have successfully treated lots of women with vaginismus.
But what actually counts as successful treatment? Maria McAvoy's research shows that the success of treatment is often measured based on whether a woman can experience penetrative sex, rather than whether that sex is pleasurable. And this experience was something that Sarah really related to.
There was a point at which I was then able to have penetrative sex. A penis could enter me. That didn't mean that it was nice. And it was it was good. I was happy because it hadn't worked, and it was painful and it burned, and I could only do it for a short time. And that was a process that, we had to work on that. I could manage it for slightly longer. I could tolerate it for slightly longer. And there was a lot of tolerating that I did. And that isn't the point where you stop and say, I've succeeded, unless you want to. The success point for me was, I'm not experiencing any pain. I'm not experiencing any shame. I'm not experiencing any regret. I'm not embarrassed about being here with you. I'm just pleased. I'm just having a good time. And there is nothing else entering my head than I'm having a nice experience. That for me was the success point.
And for Isley, the success point wasn't penetration at all. She decided she didn't want treatment and that she could have a healthy and fulfilling sex life without penetrative vaginal sex.
There's got to be more room in the narrative for you can normalise yourself, or you don't have to. You just don't have to. I think there's a massive assumption that the way that I think I'm guilty of it as well. I think we are all guilty of going, well, this really worked for me, or this made me happy, so it's bound to make other people happy. And that sort of evangelism, especially about sex and having a normal sex life, I think we're only just waking up to the bullshit of that. Really, it's been a real blessing in my life to have vaginismus, because not only has it enabled me to seek the pleasure that I genuinely feel and get pleasure from, the activities I get pleasure from, but that relationship with my body and with my sex life has influenced so many other areas of my life as well. And I think I have built from a young age this muscle of, okay, is this actually making me happy? Or am I doing something because I'm expected to do it, or everybody else is doing the same thing? I'm thrilled that vaginismus has given me that gift.
Hearing about Isley's relationship with her partner Jeffrey made me realise that vaginismus really doesn't have to be a barrier to a healthy relationship.
I think it can be difficult to talk about because it really is a non-issue.
It's not much of an issue. I mean, it doesn't. We don't sort of get into bed and think, oh, we just get on with having fun.
Yeah.
And we know what each other's likes and dislikes are. And we also, the other thing about it, Isley's an extremely good communicator, and that makes all the difference. I like this, I don't like that. This is good, and I'm enormously keen to accommodate. So
that is true.
I just think, yeah, it's good. So I mean, I don't think, oh, I'm missing out on something. So I'm 75, for God's sake. If I'm missing out now, something went wrong seriously a long time ago.
All of the women I spoke to identified having better sex education as the main way to prevent vaginismus and to tackle the taboo around women's bodies. For me, I remember during my treatment when I learnt that the vagina actually widens and lengthens when a woman's aroused. I feel like if I'd been taught that in school and we'd learnt more about the importance of pleasure during sex, my experiences having sex would have been completely different.
I would definitely include vaginismus in the curriculum in terms of just educating and providing awareness that this condition exists, because as I mentioned previously, vaginismus doesn't just apply to sex. It could be that a teenage girl in secondary school is trying to insert a tampon for the first time and she's struggling, she's finding it really uncomfortable, she's finding it painful, and she might be wondering what's wrong with her. If she realizes that she could be experiencing vaginismus where her pelvic floor muscles are tightening, causing it to be difficult for the tampons to go in, that would give her confidence to figure out how to then make it easy to insert the tampon without any pain or discomfort.
Why wouldn't you tell people that sex is pleasurable? Even parents are afraid to tell their children that because of that myth that it will make them promiscuous. But, you don't have to go then to the extreme other end where you're actually terrifying, your students or your children about sex and kind of giving the idea that it is painful and, it is a rite of passage and bleeding's involved and all of those things that, young people often hear about sex.
Before going on this journey, I'd never met anyone else with vaginismus. But speaking to these women has made me realise that whether you're able to overcome the condition or you just learn to live with it, you can have happy and healthy relationships. But with proper sex education and treatment that addresses the root cause of the problem, it's possible that vaginismus could become a much more manageable condition for many women.